The microphone caught every word. "This event is for people who matter," Julian Sterling said, his voice smooth and amplified across the ballroom. "So somebody escort her out before she embarrasses herself further." 300 guests turned at once. Crystal glasses froze halfway to painted lips. And in the center of all that gold light and quiet music stood a young woman in a plain gray uniform, a folded cleaning cloth still in her hand, her chin lifting just slightly as the whole room decided, in a single breath, that she was nobody. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She simply looked at him, calm, steady, almost curious, like a person watching someone walk confidently toward the edge of a cliff. And if any of those guests had known what she was holding back, what she could end with one phone call, they would have stopped him right there. But nobody knew. Not yet. Let me take you back 3 hours, to the moment before any of this went wrong. The Heartline Foundation Gala was the kind of evening people spent a year trying to get invited to. Marble floors polished until they doubled the chandeliers. A string quartet tucked into the corner, playing soft enough to talk over. Waiters gliding between tables with trays of food that cost more than most people earned in a week. The whole point of the night was to raise money for children's hospitals across the state, but you wouldn't always know it from the crowd. For a lot of them, the charity was just the price of being seen. Julian Sterling loved being seen. He was 33, and he ran Sterling Capital like a man who believed the building would collapse if he ever stopped, reminding everyone he was in charge. Tall, sharp. A black tailored suit that fit him like it had been stitched onto his body, a black silk tie, a watch that cost more than a house. Handsome in that cold, controlled way that made people nervous instead of comfortable. He walked into the gala that night like he owned it. He didn't. That was the thing. He ran the company. He didn't own it. But the difference between running something and owning something is exactly the kind of difference a man like Julian never bothered to learn until the night it learned him. Across the ballroom, near the service corridor, a young woman in a gray uniform was crouched by a spill near the coat check. Her name was Mara. Mid-20s, long chestnut brown hair pulled back into a low, practical knot, warm brown eyes, a face you'd trust without quite knowing why. She wiped up the broken glass and the puddle of champagne carefully, thanking the flustered waiter who'd dropped it, telling him quietly that it was fine. It happened. Go on. She wasn't supposed to be cleaning anything. She'd just been walking past when the tray slipped, and her hands had moved before she'd thought about it. Old habit. You can dress a person up however you like, but you can't always teach their hands to stop helping. Here's what nobody in that room knew. Mara wasn't staff. Mara was the reason the staff had jobs. Her grandfather had built the Heartline Foundation from a single donated clinic into one of the largest children's health charities in the country. When he passed, he hadn't left it to a board of strangers. He'd left controlling interest quietly, in trust to the one grandchild who used to follow him through hospital wards as a little girl, handing teddy bears to kids in recovery. Mara. She'd grown up rich in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with him. And when she inherited control of the foundation and a major stake in several of the companies it partnered with, she'd made one decision that scandalized her family's lawyers. She'd asked to stay anonymous. "How will people respect you?" one of them had asked her, "if they don't know who you are?" And she'd smiled and said, "I'll find out who respects me when they don't know who I am. That's the only respect worth having." So she came to her own foundation's gala that night, the way she liked to arrive at all of them early, unannounced, in plain clothes, just to see how the night actually ran when nobody was performing for the boss. She'd planned to change into her gown in 20 minutes. She never got the chance, because Julian Sterling spotted her. His company managed a chunk of the foundation's investment portfolio, a lucrative contract, one he wanted renewed and expanded that very night. He'd come to charm the foundation's leadership, whoever they turned out to be. The head of the trust was famously private, and Julian had spent a week trying and failing to find out anything about them. It frustrated him. Julian hated rooms he couldn't read. So when he saw a young woman in a cleaning uniform, crouched by the coat check, something in him relaxed. Here, at least, was someone he understood. Someone beneath him. And men like Julian have a particular hunger that flares up whenever they feel unsure of their footing. The need to put someone down, just to feel tall again. "You," he said, walking over, snapping his fingers. "There's a smudge on the glass door at the front. Handle it. Some of us actually paid to be here, and we'd like to see out the windows." Mara stood, brushing glass fragments into a napkin. She looked at him, not afraid, not annoyed, just taking him in. "Of course," she said pleasantly. "I'll let someone know." That was her mistake. In his eyes, she'd spoken to him like an equal, calm, unbothered. No flinch, no scramble. It threw him. "Let someone know?" He laughed, glancing at the two associates trailing behind him, inviting them to laugh too. They did, the way people laugh when they're afraid not to. "Sweetheart, you are the someone. That's the job." Or is wiping a window above your pay grade? A few heads turned. Mara folded the napkin neatly. "It's not my assignment tonight," she said, still kind. "But I'll make sure it gets done. The guest experience matters to me." The guest experience. He repeated it like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. "Do you hear this? She's got opinions about the guest experience." He leaned in, lowering his voice to that cruel, intimate register bullies use when they want a person to feel small in private before they make them feel small in public. "Let me give you some free advice. People like you are invisible for a reason. Keep it that way. Clean what you're told to clean, and don't ever speak to a man like me as if we're standing on the same floor, because we're not." For 1 second, something flickered in her eyes. Not hurt. Something colder and quieter than hurt. The look of a person filing a moment away in a drawer they fully intend to open later. Then it was gone, and she simply nodded. "Understood," she said. If Julian had been a smarter man, that single word would have chilled him. Understood. Not sorry. Not, "Yes, sir." Understood the word of someone keeping score. But he wasn't a smarter man. He turned and walked off feeling wonderful, the way small men do after they've kicked something that didn't kick back. Mara watched him go. Then she went to find a quiet corner to change into her gown, because the evening's program was about to begin, and she had a speech to give. She didn't make it. The doors to the main hall opened for the formal portion of the night, and the crowd flowed in toward the round tables and the stage. Mara, now caught in the press of bodies near the entrance, hadn't yet slipped away to change. She was still in grey, and Julian, up near the front with a glass of something amber in his hand, already glowing with the attention of the donors around him, saw her step through those doors into the room reserved for guests. To him, it was an insult. Staff using the main entrance. Worse staff who'd dared to talk back to him an hour earlier. Now walking in like she belonged. He didn't think. He never thought. He just reached for the microphone on the podium beside him, because he was a man who'd learned that a room will forgive almost anything if you say it confidently enough into a microphone. Excuse me," he said, and the quartet trailed off, and the chatter died, and every face turned toward the front. He smiled, charming, in control, gesturing toward the back of the room with his glass. "It seems we have a little mix-up. This part of the evening is for our guests, for the people who actually support this cause." A light laugh rippled through the half of the room that always laughs for the loudest man. "So, if someone could kindly escort the cleaning staff back to where they belong, we can get on with honoring the people who matter." And then he found her face in the crowd, and he said it. The line that would follow him for the rest of his life. "You. Grey uniform. Out. Now. Before you embarrass yourself further." Silence. That awful, ringing silence of 300 people deciding what kind of people they were going to be. Mara stood very still. She felt the heat of all those eyes. She felt the old, ugly weight of being looked at like she was less. And then she felt something her grandfather had given her a long time ago, something steadier than anger, the absolute certainty of who she was, regardless of who anyone in that room thought she was. She didn't shrink. She walked. Not out. Forward, down the center of the room, between the tables, every step echoing on that marble floor, her grey uniform impossibly out of place among the silk and the diamonds, and yet somehow, with every step, she looked less like a servant and more like the only adult in a room full of children. People shifted, whispered. A waiter near the wall, the same young man whose champagne she'd cleaned up earlier, straightened, watching her with something close to hope. Julian's smile flickered, just slightly. This wasn't the script. She was supposed to flee, red-faced, apologizing. Instead, she was coming toward him, calm as still water, and the room had gone so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. "I asked you to leave," he said into the mic, but the smoothness had a crack in it now. Mara reached the foot of the stage. She looked up at him, and when she spoke, she didn't reach for a microphone, because women like Mara had long ago learned that real power never has to raise its voice. "You keep saying the people who matter," she said, her voice carrying in the silence anyway. "I've been here for 3 hours, Mr. Sterling. I watched how you spoke to the waiter who poured your drink. I watched how you spoke to the woman at the coat check. I watched how you spoke to me. So, I'd like to ask you something, in front of all these people who matter." She paused. "Do you actually know who owns the foundation you're standing in tonight?" A murmur moved through the crowd like wind through a field. Julian's jaw tightened. "The Heartline Trust owns it. Everyone knows that. The head of the trust is—" He stopped. Because the truth was, he didn't know. He'd spent a week trying to find out, and failed. And now, with 300 people watching, he had to finish a sentence he had no end for. "A private individual," he managed. "A very private individual," Mara agreed gently. "Who likes to attend her own events, quietly, in plain clothes, so she can see how her people are really treated when no one thinks the boss is watching." She let that sit. Watched the color begin to drain from his face. "My grandfather built this foundation from one donated clinic. He used to tell me that you can learn everything about a person in 10 seconds, not by how they treat the people above them, but by how they treat the people they think are below them." She climbed the 3 steps to the stage, slowly, and as she rose, the room rose with her people half standing, phones lifting, the whole gala leaning in. "Tonight," she said, turning to face them all, "you treated me like I was nothing, and you did it loudly, into a microphone, in front of every donor whose trust you came here to win." The amber glass in Julian's hand was shaking now. He could feel the contract he'd come for evaporating, and worse, something he hadn't felt since he was a boy. He could feel himself becoming small in a room where he'd walked in feeling enormous. "Who are you?" he said. It came out barely above a whisper. Mara turned back to him. "My name is Mara Heartline," she said. "I'm the controlling trustee of this foundation. I'm the majority shareholder of the fund your company manages. And the contract you came here tonight to renew, the one that's kept Sterling Capital afloat for 3 years, sits on my desk, waiting for my signature." You could have heard a pin drop on that marble floor. Julian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His associates, the 2 who'd laughed with him at the coat check, had quietly stepped back, the way people do when they realize the ship is going down and they were standing too close to the captain. "That's not you can't," Julian fumbled. "Miss Heartline, that was a misunderstanding. I had no idea." "That's exactly the point." Her voice never rose. That was the terrifying thing about it. You had no idea. So you showed me who you really are. Thank you for that. It's the most honest thing anyone's done for me all year. He tried, then, to do the only thing men like him know how to do when cornered. He reached for his wallet. Actually reached for it, as if money were a magic word. "Let me make a donation," he blurted. "A large one, tonight. Whatever the foundation needs, name it, and here is the part the whole room would talk about for months." Mara smiled, a small, sad, almost kind smile. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "you've just shown 300 witnesses that you believe a person's worth can be measured by their uniform. So, I think you genuinely don't understand what I'm about to say to you." She paused. "You can't buy this back. There isn't a number, because the thing you stepped on tonight wasn't a cleaning lady. It was the idea that decent people deserve to be treated decently, and you can't write a check big enough to unbreak that in front of everyone who just watched you try." She turned to the room. "Sterling Capital's contract with this foundation will not be renewed," she said clearly. "Effective tonight, we'll be moving our funds to a firm whose leadership understands that the people who pour your drinks and clean your floors are exactly as human as you are. And to every donor here, I want you to know your money is safe, and it's going to children who need it, managed by people who'd never humiliate a stranger to feel important." The applause started slow. One pair of hands, the young waiter by the wall, then another. Then it rolled across the room like a wave breaking, 300 people on their feet, and it wasn't polite applause. It was the loud, fierce kind, the kind people give when they've watched something get put right in front of them. Julian stood alone on that stage in his perfect suit, in the spotlight he'd grabbed for himself, and felt every bit of it land. His associates were gone. His phone was already buzzing word travels fast at a gala full of investors, and the clip of him snarling out, "Now, before you embarrass yourself," was, by morning, going to be everywhere. The board of Sterling Capital would call an emergency meeting before the weekend. Two of his largest clients, both in that very room, would quietly take their business elsewhere within the month. The man who walked in owning the night walked out owning nothing but the memory of it. But that's not where the story ends. Because Mara wasn't done, and what she did next is the part I really want you to hear. She stepped down off the stage. She walked, not to the donors, not to the cameras, but to the back of the room, to the service corridor, where the real staff had gathered in the doorway, watching, half afraid they'd be blamed for the scene. The young waiter, the woman at the coat check, the kitchen crew in their whites, the cleaners in their grey. "I'm sorry," Mara told them, and she meant it. "You shouldn't have had to stand there and watch that. You work harder than anyone in this room, and you deserve better than to be treated like furniture." She looked at the young waiter. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he said. "Daniel, you started clapping first. You were the only one in this whole room who didn't wait to see if it was safe." She smiled. "The foundation runs a scholarship program. I'd like to talk to you about it. Tonight, if you've got a minute after your shift." Daniel's eyes went bright, and he nodded, not quite trusting his voice. And there it is. The thing the marble and the chandeliers and the diamonds could never buy. The thing Julian Sterling never understood, even as it cost him everything. Respect isn't something you demand from the top of a stage. It's something you earn on the floor, in the small moments, when you think nobody important is watching, because the truth is, everyone is important, and you never really know who's standing in front of you. Julian thought he was looking at a cleaning lady. He was looking at the woman who held the deed to his entire world. So here's what I want to know from you, and please, tell me in the comments because I read them. First, have you ever watched someone get treated like they were invisible and wished someone would step in? And second, if you'd been in that ballroom, would you have been the first to clap like Daniel, or would you have waited to see if it was safe? Be honest. I think the answer says a lot about all of us. If this story moved you, do me one small favor, hit that like button, because it genuinely helps these stories reach people who need the reminder that kindness is never weakness. Share it with someone who treats the waiter as well as they treat the boss. They've earned it. And if you're not subscribed yet, come join us, tap subscribe and ring the bell, because the next story we tell might just be the one you can't forget. I'll see you there.